Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're discussing exploring the current organic milk market today in a bit of a conversation and webinar. There are several of us on the call who will be presenting and we'll take questions. We are recording and we'll send the recording out afterward. I'm Zia. I work for NOFA Vermont as our organic practices specialist. Why don't we jump to the next slide for the agenda? So here's our quick plan for the hour here. We'll do an overview of milk markets with Jen, info on transitioning and certification with Kyla from VOF, assessment and things to consider with Sarah Flack, some resources, and we have milk buyers on the call and Mike Thresher from to talk about grain. And we're hoping to have plenty of time for Q&A. So we will ask that you hold your questions while we present. Do feel free to type them into the chat in Zoom if you would like, and I'll keep track of them there so that you don't forget. But we will do conversation and Q&A toward the end. All right, we're going to kick it off to Jen Miller, please.
Okay, hey everybody. My name's Jen Miller. I run the Farm Business Development Program here at NOFA Vermont. So just wanted to set the stage a bit with where we're at, get some basic information out about organic milk markets before we get into kind of the certification and state of the state here. So, you know, like any milk market, we're talking about an ever-changing balancing act of supply and demand. I think critical things to be aware of, right? Like we're having this webinar because milk buyers don't sign farms all the time. And you need to be lining up your transition timing with when milk buyers are actually signing. Another point to just like keep in the back of your mind is that you want a signed agreement with a milk buyer before you're getting certified organic. If you become certified, you're not guaranteed to necessarily get an organic milk contract. And you've incurred all of those costs associated, which you'll learn a lot more about soon, and not necessarily be able to sell your product at that organic price. Kyla? All right, so thinking through like milk buyer considerations, there's three milk buyers in the state. We have upstate Niagara, Stonyfield, and Organic Valley, with most farms being picked up by Organic Valley and Stonyfield. But thinking through like when you're this potential transition, right? Are you looking to become certified organic and still continue feeding grain, or are you considering a grass-fed transition? Are you like, where are you? Whose truck route are you near, if any buyers? What does your driveway access look like, and how does that match up to the truck routes that are coming through your area? And then just keeping in mind too, like all the milk buyers have different requirements and standards for the farms that they take on. There's different payments for, you know, protein and butter fat across the buyers. There, you know, quality components. So trying to really get full information about all of those different variables as you're trying to select a milk buyer. Couple more kind of grounding points. Organic milk prices are not subject to the Federal Milk Marketing Order. The prices are set by each individual milk buyer. They're intended to be stable and sustainable. I think they're going to fluctuate a bit, and they have, you know, historically. I'm going to show you a quick graph in a minute, but it's never as much fluctuation as the conventional pay price. You know, as coming into this, we'll talk later about a lot of the different costs associated with this, but then like what is really the key question that you want to say is like, yes, it's going to be more expensive to produce organic milk than it will be to produce conventional milk. But what is the difference between your organic pay price and your organic cost of production? And really doing some fine-tuned analysis to look at that. And I will say, like, you know, we've been relatively stable now, and we're getting back closer to being sustainable and meeting that kind of original true intention of organic pricing. And usually the best time to transition tends to be when conventional prices are high, because you have that extra capital available to help you with all these additional transition costs. Kyla? All right. So just to kind of show you state of what's going on before we transition into thinking about certification, The number of organic dairy farms is not shocking. Like this is, common knowledge, but from 2016 to 2024, we went from like 203 down to about 116 now. That number is starting to tick back up, and you're all here because you're potentially interested in helping that number tick back up. But that's where we're at, and kind of that overlay of what the pay price has done during that period of time. And we're now kind of again solidly back up towards getting closer and closer to being a more sustainable pay price. So that's kind of what I wanted to share about the state of organic markets right now. So I'll turn it over to Kyla to talk more in depth about organic certification.
All right. Hi, all. My name is Kyla Parmelee. I am a certification specialist with VOF, Vermont Organic Farmers, based in Vermont. I get the fun job of talking about all the rules. Yay. So organic certification. It is a federal regulated program. So this is not just your certifier telling you what you have to do. It's a federal program. It is run by the National Organic Program, or the NOP. It is an annual process, so you're going to be doing this every year. The first step is to complete your organic system plan, otherwise known as your OSP or application. So this plan is just kind of outlining how you will be managing organic for the upcoming year. Once that's submitted, it takes a lot of work to get all the information together at first, but once it's submitted, then you're just updating it year to year. So in addition to submitting that OSP, you're also going to pay a fee. After we in the office receive your application or OSP, we're then going to review it, look for any missing information or red flags. We then pass this information on to an inspector. The inspector is going to contact you to set up a time to schedule your inspection. So it is a preset time. At the inspection, this is a big piece to the certification. So this is where they're really verifying all of your records and just reviewing and going through your records to make sure that everything is following the organic regulations and rules. And then, so record keeping is a big part of it. And then also they do kind of a tour of the farm. So they're going to go around and look at your operation, any production facilities, fields, and also kind of compare what's happening on the ground to what you said you were doing in your OSP. So after the inspection, the inspector writes up a report, sends it back to us in the office. We review that, and we are going to identify any issues or red flags. We let you know about those. There's a time frame for responding to those, so just please pay close attention to that. After we do that final review, that's when your certificate is issued or renewed, and that's when you're good to sell organic product. So for organic dairy, there's kind of two parts, or what we call scopes. There's crops and livestock. So I will jump into crops. Again, this is a lot of information. I'm going to kind of fly through it. So please put your questions in the chat or hold on to them for the end. All right, crops. So the big thing with crops is that fields have to have received no prohibited inputs. So if they have received a prohibited input, that would be something like a synthetic fertilizer or pesticide, GMO treated seed. And if anything like that has been on the field, then you do have to transition that field, and it will take 3 years. Another thing to consider is neighboring land use. So your fields that you want to use, you want to consider, who's next door. Is it a conventional cornfield or even a residential property, telephone poles, things like that. And depending on what it is and the risk of contamination, you might have to have a buffer between that area and your organic crop. You also must maintain or improve soil fertility. You must use organic seed. There is a commercial availability. So if you can't find that seed in the variety, quality, or quantity, then you can buy non-organic untreated seed, but you do have to document your search for that organic seed. Quickly, some records that are key for crop production would be your input application. So that's like your manure spreading records, seeding records, harvest and sales records, and it also helps to have like a feed inventory record. And then you should keep receipts for all purchased seed. And then again, if you can't find organic seed, keep that documentation for seed search. So now the big one, livestock. So how to get into organic dairy. So there's kind of two options. You can first buy an already certified organic herd. The second option is there's a one-time opportunity if you're new to organic livestock certification where you can transition your current animals to organic. So again, this takes a full year where they're under organic management. And then kind of a third option is, if you want to get right into it, shipping milk, you can buy an organic herd. And then if you have a group of young stock, you could transition your group of young stock. So do the 1-year transition for those. Some key records that you'll want to keep for origin of livestock is animal identification. So all animals should have an ID. And that should include, their dam, birth date, all of the traceability information. If you purchase them, where from, and then if they're transitioned, they should be noted. And then you should keep purchase and sales records for all animals and organic certificates as well for any animals that you purchase that are organic. And these sales and purchase records should include your identification and organic slaughter eligibility or organic status. So organic slaughter eligibility is any animal that was raised organically for the last third of their gestation is going to qualify as organic. So anybody that transitioned, this is a big note because the rules have changed. Any animals that have transitioned, they cannot be sold as organic. So they can never be sold for organic meat because of that last third part. And they can only be sold for organic dairy with special permission. You need a variance from the National Organic Program. So just a heads up on that. Feed. So all livestock feed must be certified organic. There's no exceptions or allowances for this. So definitely consider that. Even in a drought or if it's really hard to find feed, there's no give on this. The feed must be certified organic. If you are transitioning fields and a herd, you can feed that in the 3rd year of transition. You can feed that crop to transitioning animals and their young stock. Some important records for this to keep are receipts and organic certificates for all purchase feed. You want to keep receipts for any supplements and feed additives. And then a big piece of this that folks often struggle with is ration records. So you do need to document how much feed you're feeding to each group of animal, and then when it changes, especially during the grazing season. So in the late summer slump, you should be recording any supplemental feed that you have to feed. And then it is part of the rules. You should have an idea, know how to calculate your dry matter demand for each animal group and also their dry matter intake. All right. Livestock care and production. So a key piece of this, of being organic and doing livestock, is prevention. So preventative healthcare is so, so, so important. You really want to try to address those issues before they become a big problem. So prevention is key. You are allowed to do physical alterations. They're allowed for identification and the safety of animals, but tail docking and face branding are not allowed. Some new parts to the rule, you do have to have plans now for addressing lameness and for euthanasia, also for parasite prevention. You should have a plan in place, again, focusing on those preventative management. You are allowed to use dewormers. There's 2, fenbendazole and moxidectin, but again, those are only allowed in emergencies and when the measures that you've stated in your OSP are no longer working. So it's really kind of a last ditch. You do have to let your certifier know about that. There is a national list. So normally healthcare materials you'll use are natural, non-synthetic, but the national list is a list in the rules that allows you to use some synthetic materials. And there are some restrictions to some of those materials. I won't go into the details, but just a heads up. And then, jumping slides. A big thing is you can't withhold medical treatment. So even though to be organic, you can't use antibiotics, if it will save an animal's life, you should use those antibiotics to save their life. So that is a big part of it. Again, you want to notify your certifier anytime you do have to use an antibiotic. Some records that you'll want to keep. Again, You'll have to have plans for lameness, parasite prevention, and euthanasia, and then healthcare records. So this is a record of all of your medical treatments, including vaccines, if you've had to withhold any milk. You also want to keep vet slips and then receipts for any healthcare materials that you've purchased. All right, living conditions. So this brings us into a big piece of organic certification for livestock. You are required to have daily outdoor access for your animals. And yes, even in the winter, this can be a challenge for folks. It's, winter in the Northeast can be challenging, but they do have to have the option to go out daily. There are some allowances for temporary confinement that you'll see listed here. I won't go over them all, but in these instances, you can keep the cows in temporarily. You just need to, again, document that, the date, reason why. And just know inclement weather, again, it can't be the entire winter. So you have to figure out a way to make sure those cows are getting out even in the winter time. A big part of it too, you have to have clean, dry bedding. If it's roughage, so any straw or hay, that does have to be certified organic because there's the potential that they could eat it. Also, manure management is a part of it. You can't put any risk to water or soil quality. And then the last big piece of this is access to pasture. So during the grazing season, you're required to get those animals out on pasture. And this is for the outdoor access and pastures for all animals over 6 months old. So young stock under 6 months does have an exemption. So some records for this, again, those temporary confinement records, you're going to want to document when you turn your cows out and barn them up, and then receipts for any bedding. All right, and that last but not least is the pasture practice standard. So this is kind of, in addition to outdoor access, this is the other big part of being organic. So you do have to graze your cows. There's the pasture rule where you have to have an average of 30% of your animal's dry matter intake has to come from pasture. And this is an average over the whole grazing season. So the grazing season should be reasonable for your geographical region. It has to be at least 120 days. But here in Vermont, we say usually it's about 150 days for a geographical region. Pasture, you have to manage it as a crop, and you have to make sure there's enough of it throughout the entire grazing season for your animals to graze. Another part of this is a pasture plan. So in your organic system plan, you'll submit a plan for the grazing season, including acreage, kind of the type of grazing you do, your stocking density, how long you let the pastures rest or recover. And then you'll also have to have pasture maps. So these pasture maps should show where shade and water is, and then any permanent fence. So if you want to move forward with organic certification, definitely recommend you contact a certifier sooner rather than later. Please do not wait on this. It's not necessarily a quick turnaround. I'd say probably takes about 6 weeks. So if you're thinking about it, please get in touch. A lot of these situations, especially if you're transitioning, can be a little nuanced and complicated. So I know certifiers probably want to know sooner rather than later and help you work through these situations. So you can choose your own certifier. You're not required to use a certain one. I'm with Vermont Organic Farmers, VOF, and we certify here in Vermont. Some other options, there's Bay State Organic. They're based out of Massachusetts. There's MOFGA. They're based out of Maine. And then PCO is based out of Pennsylvania. So just for folks who are outside of Vermont. And then last but not least, I just wanted to mention the cost share reimbursement program. So this historically has been a program that will reimburse you for up to 75% or $750, whichever, for each scope. So for livestock, that is crops, livestock, and then also handling because you're shipping milk. So you can get reimbursed for those certification fees that you paid. Unfortunately, this program is a little bit in limbo right now. With the Farm Bill extension, the cost share program was not included. So there is a separate pool of money. I know in Vermont, I think we still work through this separate pool. So our farmers in Vermont will still get this reimbursement to our knowledge so far. I'm not sure about other states, but just a heads up on that. And then I think that's all I got for you guys. That was a lot. Feel free to come back to the slides later. I'm going to pass it off now to Sarah, who's going to talk about some things to consider before going organic.
Great. Thank you, Kyla. So I'm going to go through a bunch of what you need to think about if you're doing an assessment on your individual farm. So apologies, my puppy has decided this moment to chew on the leg of the chair. So one of the things I get to do as a consultant is go visit a dairy farm and help them figure out whether it's a good idea or not a good idea for their particular situation to transition to organic and start selling organic milk. And it's a very farm by farm specific process of figuring it out. So some of the key points that we would be assessing and figuring out whether it's a good idea for your farm is looking at the land base in terms of some of the pasture stuff that Kyla was talking about. If you've got the infrastructure to meet some of the housing and outdoor access requirements, what is it going to cost your specific farm to transition to organic? And then looking long-term at what would your organic cost of production be and how would that compare to the pay price once you're certified organic? And then I'll just go very quickly through a couple of the common management challenges in the transition or once you're organic. Next slide, Kyla. So the land transition, things to think about, and some of this is very going to really drive what the cost is for your individual farm to transition, is how long are your field transitions? Is your land already going to qualify as organic and you just need to go through the certification process? Or do you have 3 full years to wait for some or all of those fields? Some farms are looking at continuing to produce corn or corn silage or other annual crops organically. Others are going to convert over to more perennials. So there may be some costs associated with seeding. Then you've got to think about what fertilizers you're going to use. They're going to have very different costs. And things like nitrogen in particular are very difficult to buy as a fertilizer. Most people end up relying on manure. And so that may be impacting your yields. And then you may have to also think about if you're going to feed less grain overall in the ration, you need to think about, will there be additional forages that you need to put in your ration, or are you actually going to change your land base? Your herd size or rent more land. Next slide. So pasture is often one of the things that determines how big your herd size can be if you decide to go organic, because you've got to have enough acres of land within cow walking distance of the dairy barn to be able to meet the pasture intake requirement that Kyla was talking about. So, and then you've got to decide whether you want to just hit the bare minimum for pasture intake at 30 or 35%. The requirement is 30%. Or do you want to go for a much higher level of pasture intake so that you have a lower feed cost during the grazing season? So that'll determine how many acres you need or how many cows you can have if you have a limited land base within walking distance of the milking facility. You may have some cost associated with converting cropland to pasture. And then you've got to think about having enough land for the young stock, since everyone over 6 months needs to graze. And the good part of this is then if you're converting from a confinement situation to grazing, you're going to be replacing a bunch of stored feed in the ration with pasture. So you can then calculate how much less stored feed, stored forages that you need. Next slide. So that was thinking about the land base and some of the costs and limitations with that for your individual farm. We also have to think about the winter outdoor access areas, since you've got to have something where you can get every animal over the age of 6 months outside, even in the winter. And so That could be a large barnyard. It could be a smaller barnyard. If you've got loose housing and the door can be left open, animals can go out. But for some farms, you've got to take the time and sometimes a significant amount of money to construct a winter outdoor access area that's going to work. Calf housing modifications are sometimes needed. And then for grazing systems, if you don't have one already, you're looking at needing fence, lanes for cow walking, and then providing drinking water out in the pastures. Next slide. So I take two different steps when I'm looking at the costs associated with going organic. The first thing I do in an assessment with a farmer, instead of looking at the cost of the transition right off, I look at the farm's current cost of production. And then we do a calculation to project what the cost of production would be for that farm once they're organic. So then you can look at what the potential net income is going to be once the farm is certified organic and shipping milk. And then if it looks like the net income is adequate, then the next stage is to look at the cost of actually transitioning. Next slide. So that's when we look at either the 1 year or in some cases 3 full years of transitioning to organic. And for some farms, this is going to be a fairly small transition cost associated with the land. Generally, most of the cost is either transitioning the herd, where you're feeding organic grain while you're getting a conventional pay price, or it's the cost of purchasing an organic herd. And one of the interesting things that has happened in the last year is that the price people have to pay to buy organic cows has significantly gone up with the demand for milk and the shortage of organic cows. So organic milk buyers will often pay a transition incentive during your herd transition, which can help decrease the amount of money you have to come up with from somewhere else to pay for the transition. But it may not be enough, and frequently farms do need to take out some sort of loan or find some cash somehow to pay for that transition. So then you've got to make sure that once you're certified organic, that you've got enough net income to pay any additional loans for the transition or the purchase of an organic herd. So I think this is my last slide, just looking at some of the most common transition and certified organic management challenges. Kyla very briefly mentioned healthcare. I picked out the 3 main ones that I see farms struggling with the most. One is coccidiosis in the young stock, because you can't routinely include the use of decox or Corid or something like that. And so if you're relying on something like that in the milk replacer to prevent coccidiosis, you'll have to come up with a different prevention plan. Same thing with parasites. Can't have the routine use of those dewormers. And then mastitis, I find that most well-managed dairies have less of a challenge with mastitis management without routine use of antibiotics, but it's certainly something to work on the plan before you transition. And then outdoor access in the non-grazing season we talked about, that can be very challenging if it's icy, if the barnyard gets muddy, if it's not well designed. If pasture management is something new, because we're not talking about just outdoor access pasture access, we're talking about managing pasture as a crop. So some people need a full grazing plan and some cropland converted to pasture. And then it can be very different when you're not using the synthetic fertilizers, especially the synthetic nitrogen sources to maintain crop yields. And then Kyla mentioned record keeping at least 20 times, I think. And that really is a thing. There's definitely a lot of record keeping associated with being organic. So after you do the whole assessment for your farm and figure out whether you have the infrastructure, the land, and if it's going to work out for you financially, you've also got to just take a moment, talk it over with your family, and make sure that you're up for the record keeping task associated with it. And I think that's my last slide.
Okay, so with all that information, I guess we're gonna wrap up this part of it by just sharing out that you're not necessarily having to go at this alone, right? Like there's a lot of options to access both business management support and production technical assistance to help you figure out what makes sense for your business. So, our farmer services program, we are farm viability service providers. So we work with people for 2 years doing intensive business planning and transfer planning. We also we can do standalone, kind of looking at cash flow projections. That can include figuring out how to access that if you are going forward, like what does that bridge financing look like in your herd transition year, and help you figure that out. We also run through and do cost of production analysis and have robust data sets to help you figure out if potentially your cost of production will be in the ballpark of where it needs to be viable. And then we also have funding to do, pay for folks like Sarah or independent nutritionists to come out to the farm to do kind of the land-based assessment, work on a pasture and grazing management plan with you, work on herd nutrition, dialing your rations throughout this whole process. And Zia will chat about a little bit more certification assistance.
Sure. Great. We've had a lot of wonderful information here. We've expanded our services at NOFA Vermont. So I work on the NOFA side of our nonprofit, whereas Kyla mentioned that she works for Vermont Organic Farmers, the certification part of our organization. So I have a relatively new position through the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, where we want to support folks in this process of going through certification, implementing more organic practices, exploring whether it's a good fit. So we can help you with filling out the application, the OSP, the Organic System Plan. The record keeping that we've been mentioning is so important. So a third party can easily look at your business and understand what has happened. To make that easier, we have certain checklists on our website so that you know what records you will need and some templates that you can use. And then I'll also mention that we're offering this year-long farmer-to-farmer or peer-to-peer mentorship program. We are enrolling folks right now for 2025. So if any of this feels daunting and you would like some ongoing help with a farmer who's been through this process, maybe has done organic certification for years and years, they are an expert. Maybe you have someone in mind that you already know of in your area, or we can match you. It's a really neat program. It's only the second year that it's running. So definitely wanted to put in a plug for that through the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. All right. So we have our contact info here for the folks who've spoken so far, myself, Jen, Kyla, and Sarah. We're going to transition now. We have good timing here. And the idea was to have the 3 milk buyers in the space in the room with us here. I don't think that Mike Brown is on the call. Okay.
No, I don't see that Mike Brown from upstate has come in yet. Mike, if you're in for some reason under somebody else's name, let us know.
We're looking for Mike Davis, not Mike Brown. So.
Oh, sorry, Mike Davis. Yeah. Yeah, so upstate Niagara, since Mike Davis is not here, is a milk buyer picking up from a Vermont perspective along the Canadian border, kind of along the northern part of Vermont. They also pick up through northern New York State. And Jen, do you want to add anything to that since Mike Davis is not here?
No, I mean, they've been picking up some farms recently, so it's worth it. It's generally in the Newport and surrounding town vicinity is their pickup, their truck route right now.
Yeah, and they certainly are looking for milk right now. And farmers in general seem to be pretty happy with the relationship with them and pay prices.
Yeah.
There was one resource I realized we should have mentioned before Organic Valley folks talk too. If anyone decides they want to transition to organic and to 100% grass-fed milk production, There are resources on grass-fed dairy production available on the University of Vermont's Northwest Crops and Soils website, including information on how to do that much more difficult transition to grass-fed production.
Great. Okay, so thanks for speaking to Upstate Niagara a little bit. We'll have the other two folks on the call just do a quick introduction of their company, talk about your geographic area, and let's do that. Great. Welcome, John.
All right. Hi, folks. John Cleary. Work for Organic Valley Cooperative. I live here in Plainfield, Vermont. We've got a small farm here ourselves, and I've been working for the co-op for 19 years. So I've seen a lot of things come and go. It is a good time to be an organic dairy farmer, and it feels good to know that the marketplace actually wants the products that organic farmers are producing. There's a number of market conditions that we won't go into right now, but I feel like that are look promising as we look into the near-term future, next couple of years. I feel like pricing is going to be stable. I feel like demand is going to be strong. I feel like it's a good market. The challenge is getting in, right? If you're a conventional farmer, the one-year transition, or if you're thinking about buying organic cows, those are expensive right now, but there's a great opportunity. Organic Valley is a cooperative, so we are owned by the farmers. There's no outside investors or shareholders. There's a board of directors made up of active organic dairy farmers that make our final decisions. We also have a dairy executive committee that are made up of farmers elected by their peers. So we have 3 regions in Vermont, for example, that have elected farmer leaders that get on monthly conference calls and talk about pay price, policy, markets, any kind of changes. So there's a lot of democratic involvement in the business. We bottle a lot of milk here in Vermont at the HP Hood plant. Our model is generally that we use other plants. We do own some plants around the country, but we generally use other plants in the region to bottle under our brand. We also provide some, bulk sales or some store branded product. So for example, we bottle some milk in Vermont here for Trader Joe's as well as under our own brand. New England and Vermont continue to be important place to have milk for us. So it's pretty easy to add farms here. We've got routes all around the state. We do have 100% grass-fed routes as well. So that's an option. Farms that are doing a full 1-year transition with a conventional herd, we do have transition payments. Or if they're doing a year transition with conventional heifers, there's also a transition payment program for farms like that. So be in touch. There's some financial assistance. We have some services that are part of the co-op. We have several veterinarians that are on staff and a nutritionist and a grazing specialist that are available to help you answer questions through the transition. I'm obviously available to be on the ground and help you figure out if it's the right thing for you and how to get through that transition successfully. So, our pricing is all based on your components and quality. Pricing is up significantly for 2025. The grass-fed pricing is a $6 premium over our regular organic price. Grass-fed is something a farm kind of needs to sort of earn the ability to do. It's not something that's you just jump right into if you haven't had some experience with that already. But the grass-fed demand continues to grow as well. Organic Valley is currently the fastest growing organic dairy brand in the marketplace. So I feel confident just about the near-term future of the markets, sort of stableness and solidity of the co-op, and feeling like it's a great opportunity for farmers that have the land and the cows to do it. So myself and Mike Brown cover New England. I'm based here in Vermont primarily. Anyone can reach out to me and glad to answer any questions. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, John. We'll put the contact slide back up in a bit. And we'll take questions in a few minutes here. Jason, any luck?
Working now?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah, if it's okay, I have a couple slides that I can share. Otherwise, I can just talk through them as well.
Yep. Are you able to share your slides?
Yep. Uh, can you see them now?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, thanks for having us. Jason Johnson. I work for Stonyfield Lactalis US Yogurt, and a couple other people. I'll put their contact info up as well at the end. But
Hey, Jason,
I
do you want to make yours full screen so we can see the slides a little better? Like, yeah, thank you.
thank you.
Wait, now you got to shift display. We're looking at like the presenter.
Now you're challenging me, Jen.
Oh, what? Go up to the top. You see where that display settings is up the top?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep,
click
yep.
on that, and then there you go.
Swap presenter.
Yeah.
There we go. Cool. I just threw a couple slides together of how we see current organic market conditions. So I would say demand is extremely strong. If you look at consumer demand for organic dairy, it's currently outperforming all dairy by 2.7 times. The supply short, I would say that's nationally as well as the Northeast. We see a shortage in supply or organic milk, and some of the key highlights is origin of livestock rule and strengthening organic enforcement rules over the past few years have worked. And now we have less animals, but that's good. That's what should have happened. So now is the time to have opportunity to transition if you aren't already in the organic market. But we're seeing opportunity to enter, which we haven't seen since 2017, either as new startups or conventional herds that are looking to switch over. Particularly, I think obviously anybody can switch to organic if you can meet the requirements that we heard a lot about earlier. But cows 150 and less and are already grazing operations. Those are places where I think people should definitely consider. 4 quick bullet points about Stonyfield Yogurt. If you don't know anything about it, history and evolution. Actually founded as a small nonprofit or organic school in Wilton, New Hampshire in 1983, and later became a brand. Started as a farming school, but quickly pivoted to focus on environmental and economic sustainability as well as healthy food. Began as a small operation, Samuel Kamen and Gary Hirschberg, which many people know, making yogurt from their home, then their factory at their farm, and then eventually expanding to Londonderry, New Hampshire. In 2017, Lactalis Group, a French-owned company, acquired Stonyfield. It is a privately held company. It's not publicly traded. And they really acquired Stonyfield because they thought it was a great brand, a great complement, and an entrance into organic agriculture, especially in the US. And our sustainability efforts, we continue to advocate for organic farming, have since organic became a thing. Carbon reduction and sequestration, as well as non-organic or non-GMO ingredients. And the future of Stonyfield, I would say, innovation and products. There's been several major expansions in the last 5 years in Londonderry. The plant is there, runs 24 hours a day. Continue to look at innovative formats, new products. Sustainability goals of reducing carbon footprint along the supply chain and investing in regenerative agriculture. Consumer trends. We see consumers adapting, growing demand for clean, organic, and sustainable food options. Why we see the organic space demand increasing. And I would say market position, we continue to be leaders in the organic dairy space, naturally and globally. last slide, and then just some contact info. So we have two other people on our team, Jeremy Russo, who's actually organic dairy producer, was himself, and then Aaron Marlowe, who's been in the dairy industry in New England for 20 something years. But we just put together a few tips. Connect with farmers that have successfully transitioned to organic production. There's many out there. If you need their names, we're more than happy to give them to you. They're more than happy to share their experiences, their pitfalls, and their success. Research financial assistance for transitions from both processors, which has already been mentioned, but also government and organic associations. Build a thorough understanding of organic management practices before you take the leap. Leverage available resources that are out there, because there's lots, we've heard about them. And then really assess, grazing practices. Are you grazing now? Is it something that you're willing to embrace? And do you have the land to do it? And last is my contact info, Aaron and Jeremy's as well. And I'm sure this is going to be recorded and sent out, but always happy to chat, come visit with you at your farm. I'll stop sharing. Our direct supply program started about 11 years ago, and we continue to expand that today. Sourcing milk in New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, but New England in general.
Excellent. Thank you both, John and Jason. That's fantastic. Okay. I want to flag that we do have Mike Thresher on our call here from Morrison's Custom Feeds, in case there are questions about organic grain. But for the last 10 minutes here, we wanted to open it up to questions. I don't see that anyone has typed in the chat, which is fine. Feel free to raise your hand, your digital hand or your real hand, or unmute.
And while we're waiting to see if there's any questions, I just want to mention, I know there are some folks who are not from Vermont attending today. And for those of you in other states, particularly if you're in New York or Massachusetts or Pennsylvania, there are quite a number of other milk buyers who are looking to source organic milk in those states, but we're not covering that info here today.
Fair enough. So we did fly through a lot of information. We are recording and we'll send it out afterwards so you can stop at any of the slides you'd like to review. And if you're shy about asking questions on the call, maybe let's put our contact info slide back up, Kyla, if you would. We're happy to be in touch and hear from you. Great. Well, Mike, Mike Thresher, I don't know if you want to be put on the spot or want to say a couple words about what you offer. You're welcome to.
Sure. Thanks, Zia. Yeah, we're a full service feed mill here in Barnet, Vermont. Been working with organics for 26 years. I've been involved for 25 myself. Helped transition a ton of farmers over the last 25 years. Former farmer for myself way back when, rotationally grazed in the 90s. So I've got 35 years of rotational grazing experience and knowledge. Still won't say I'm an expert because every year Mother Nature gives us a new challenge. You guys hit a lot of great high points of some of the things to consider when you're going organic. Animal health. We look at nutrition as a prevention. I think it's key, no matter what market you're in, whether you're conventional or organic. Should always look at nutrition prevention of a lot of diseases and focus on that. There's a lot of tools that we can use organically, nutritionally, that things that come along, like pneumonias, calf scours, E. coli, things like that. There's feed additives like certain moss products and other products out there for good gut health. So there's Really nothing that I haven't seen organically that we can't treat and survive quite well. So I was going to put my contact into the chat box here and email. If you guys have any questions after this, feel free to reach out. Be happy to help answer any questions anytime. Thanks.
Thank you. Could you provide more details regarding outdoor access areas from Sunday Bell Farm? Does a covered barnyard qualify? Good question. And then we'll hear from Shelby.
It's a good question. Nuance. So there's no requirements in the regulation around the size of the outdoor access area for the ruminant livestock. So in that sense, as long as the animals can get out. Covered barnyards, with these new rules, they've been pretty clear that any enclosed space is not outdoor access. They should have outdoor access. We do have, every certifier might be a little bit different. In Vermont with VOF, we have made some exceptions in really special situations where a barnyard would be right up against a stream or something where runoff would be a concern. But you should, if you're thinking about getting into it, daily outdoor access is a big piece to it that you need to plan for.
Thanks, Kyla. And we do have contact info listed in the chat for folks on the call. Shelby, did you want to ask your question?
I don't have a question, but my name is Shelby. I work for the National Farmers Organization. I'm a field rep in Vermont and New Hampshire. I'm also an inspector in New York State for the company. So we handle for all organic companies across the country, actually. So I just want to say I'm here and I'm happy to help any farmers that are in need also.
Great, thanks for joining. Okay. Oh, are there any other additional management practices that buyers require above and beyond organic standards?
Yes. I mean, I'll let the milk buyers speak, but they might have their own internal policies aside from the organic regulations, like I know Organic Valley does for animal welfare and housing.
Yeah, we do. We have animal care standards. My sense is that, a well-run dairy that's meeting the organic standards is going to have a pretty easy time meeting our standards as well. But we do have a set of animal care standards. And there are some additional things like the grass-fed, obviously, besides the 100% like no grain, it's a 60% requirement of dry matter intake from pasture. So there are a few things like that. And there are milk quality standards, but then again, those are numbers you want to hit anyway to get your premiums, to have clean milk. So I don't see these additional standards as being big hurdles. It's more just like understanding what they are as, you work through them.
Great.
This is Jason from Stonyfield. I think I would echo a lot of what John said. Like every company has its nuances with its own programs, whether it's animal care standards or environmental standards, but a well-managed dairy farm isn't going to have big hurdles, I don't think, to overcome them, because the reality is most of the dairy industry has more standards than just the organic requirements, whether you're organic or not. So you're going to have to be meeting those needs anyways. So.
Do you foresee premiums for A2 in the future?
I'll just mention that it comes up all the time, and farmers talk to us about it a lot. When you ask the marketing and salespeople, they'll say that consumers are still fairly uninformed about that in terms of the size of the market. So we don't have a A2 market plan currently. It's something that might happen in the future, but it's not. If I was going to look at forward, the next 3 years, I don't see that happening with Organic Valley right now.
I would just
Yeah.
add that there are some big differences in terms of the milk buyers incentivizing the amount of butter fat. So like depending on the breed you have and your kind of milk solids, it's worth talking to all the milk buyers to figure out for your specific farm, you know, how does their pay price formula work for you? But nobody's paying for A2 in Vermont yet. They are in New York.
Yeah,
Jason?
I would say, yeah, we don't have an A2 program. Personally, I see the industry. If you look at A2 genetics across the industry, it's so predominating now that it may just become the standard rather than the exception down the road. You know, I'm looking many years down the road, but and I think Sarah's comments are great. I think that if you really want to consider, like, have an open conversation, if you want to talk to us, like, we'll come to the farm and show you exactly what our pay price program is, because every company has their own nuances, what they pay for quality, what they pay for volume, what they pay for all whole host of different things, how they value different components, and really, and what they pay throughout the year. Some companies differ, so I think you need to sit down with the ones that you're interested in and really look at like a whole year.
Fair enough. What assurances are the milk buyers offering prospective producers during transition? Are these assurances legally binding? As our last question here.
I'll jump in there too. Basically, we sign a co-op membership agreement when a farm is starting their 1-year transition. So that gives them the same rights as current members in terms of the process of participating in the co-op. So basically, we are guaranteeing when you start your year transition that we'll pick up your milk on that date a year later, as long as you do follow through with fully getting certified, that kind of stuff. It's really solid. And the market conditions, I think, in general now are solid. It's not a risky choice for farms to make if they can pull off the production side.
Great.
Yeah, so we actively transitioned a couple farms last year. When we started our program, half of the farms that joined our direct supply were transitions, so fairly knowledgeable about how it works. And we sign a contract up front, like, you know, you have a market before you transition, as long as you complete the transition. And we, as part of that, we offer transition payments during the last year. So you have a contract in hand, you're receiving money from us, so it's solid.
Good. Thank you both. Okay, we're going to wrap up just after 1 here. Thank you all for joining us. This was amazing to get all of this knowledge and information in one place. And we will send out the recording. I'm not sure when, but we will. Thank you very much. Please be in touch if you have more questions.
Thank you for hosting.